Hello, it's Bob Greenup here from BNI Sydney Central and Sydney South, Executive Director for those regions. And I'm coming to you today to talk about the creation of new BNI chapters. This session will not be covering anything about BNI in terms of the product. It's assumed that if you're coming along this session, you've already watched some of the material on BNI chapters themselves, what they produce, the sort of results they get. And you would already know that BNI is the most successful referral marketing platform on the planet. So you're here now today, I hope, to find out how you can actually get your own chapter, because it can be difficult to get into an existing chapter. So for those people, we need to build new chapters, and we're going to walk you through the process, the steps to be able to get your own chapter created, and we'll see if you want to go further with us. So Dan Shepherd is the Chapter Development Director in this particular area. We look after the chapters that fall within the geographic region from Sydney Harbour down to Nowra and from the eastern suburbs out to Auburn. So either one of us may be in contact with you in order to be able to work out where we can best serve you in getting your journey started. So let's have a look at the process, starting a new chapter. It's roughly a 14 to 20 week process. It's not a precise number because it depends on the number of people that are involved in the process, their level of commitment, their level of energy, their connections, their networks. So it can vary a little bit. It does take a lot of commitment though. Anybody who has started a business from a greenfield operation from scratch into a multi-million-dollar business would understand that it takes a fair bit of effort. And what you're actually doing is combining your efforts with a range of other business people who in a period of less than 6 months are going to produce a business which within the first year could potentially turn over $1 million or more. And certainly most of our experience has been that $1 million in the first 12 months is pretty normal. And ultimately these businesses turn over millions of dollars a year. So it does take a fair degree of commitment and determination to be able to get through that process, to be able to create that greenfield site. The energy and the focus on building it are pretty unrelenting for that 14 to 20 week period, and you're doing that alongside running your own business. So I don't want to sort of downplay the amount of effort that takes to actually build a new chapter, but it's definitely a worthwhile investment. Some of the new chapters that we've developed are now turning over $5 and $10 million a year, only a few short years after they were created. So it's certainly worth the effort if you can put the energy and focus into this project. It also needs an abundance mindset. And now what does an abundance mindset mean? It means that you have to be of a niched mindset in terms of your business, and others who are part of this process also have the same attitude. So you don't want to have a situation where you've got, let's say, 3 or 4 streams of activity in your business, and you don't want anybody in the room who actually even touches on any of those other secondary streams of activity you've got that might interfere with your expansion of your business interests. If you do that, you'll never get a chapter together. You basically have to select a niche that you're going to specialize in. And probably the easiest one to talk about here is the lawyers, because there's so many areas of law, so many areas of specialty. It's probably the easiest one. It does apply to a whole range of different industries. We've got family lawyers, we've got commercial lawyers, we've got IP lawyers, we've got criminal lawyers. So there's about 10 or 12 different categories of law in a chapter. So you can't come in, for example, as legal services, because that would literally discount 3, 4, or 5 different people from not being in the chapter. And every person that comes into a chapter basically brings their network into that chapter. And every network that comes into a chapter typically brings between $100,000 to $200,000 a year in business opportunities with them. So if you block out 5 categories in a chapter, then effectively you've reduced the revenue for all the members by roughly $1 million a year. So it has quite a dramatic effect on the profitability and the viability of a chapter. So an abundance mindset is something that we need to be very conscious of. You need to work out what your strongest niche is, how you would like to be represented in terms of the category you've been allocated or selected for in that chapter, and then respect the fact that that's the niche that you're going to be marketing, have the exclusive marketing rights for that particular activity. So the way we actually create a chapter, there's a 4-step process in creating a chapter. The first one is evaluation, then we go through the seed process, then the build process, and then we go through the charter. So let's walk through this process. The first thing we would have expected you to do is to investigate BNI, to understand what BNI is about, what its philosophy is, what its culture is. You may have already visited a BNI chapter. You might have spoken to other members, leadership teams. You might have friends who are in BNI, so you have some idea of how the culture works. You lodge an application form, and once you've lodged that application form, which comprises an expectations form as well as an application form in terms of the new chapter startup, and we go through some due diligence on your background, on your business, to make sure that you're going to be somebody who resonates with the values of a BNI chapter. Now, we're looking for certain things, and I do cover those actually in the BNI webinar, which we run separately. So we go through a due diligence process to make sure we've got the sort of people that we can actually build a strong community around inside a chapter. Once we've accepted you, then we go through some education on what the process is in terms of building the chapter, how to invite people along, how to expand your network, how to leverage your network. And you seek, when doing that, to engage in your immediate business community. And this can also be relatives, friends, and so on, people that you actually have a social engagement with, because often we forget about the fact that these people are obviously working or in a business and generating a need for sales all the time. You do the follow-up process with those people. You invite them along to see if they want to be part of the seed process. So the seed process operates up till the point where we have 10 people, typically, who are interested in building a chapter. So we don't really officially start a discipline program until we've actually got around 8 to 10 people already in the process. So we go through this engagement process with the community immediately around those 8 to 10 people, or the 4 or 5 people we start with, and follow them up and bring them along. We share what the insights are. We are not here to sell them anything. We are basically here to make sure they're aware of what the opportunity is. It's a limited opportunity. They have to make their own decision as to whether or not they want to be part of that journey. If they are not enthusiastic, willing participants, they won't work. They're actually of no use to the group. So the group basically needs to be comfortable that they're going to be a fit. The director needs to be comfortable that they have been given all of the information necessary to make that decision. And if they tick all the boxes, and for them, BNI ticks all the boxes, then they'll convert into being part of the seed group. When we've got to 8 to 10 people in that seed group, at the end of that second column, we'll go into the official build process. So we go through 2 phases in the first part of the build. And the first 2 phases are pretty much the same thing, though. We're actually still inviting people. So we're looking for people who are committing to the process formally. So they're going to commit to being part of this chapter. They're going to actively put time aside each week to go and network and invite people and reach out to the business community and find people who would like to actually be part of this group. And strategically, they are a fit for the group. So we're really trying to make sure that when the group builds, you're looking for the sorts of people that you know you're going to be able to build a solid referral relationship with. Same thing though, you're inviting, you're following people up, we're actually giving them the information. And as a result of getting that information and working out from their own due diligence, they'll either convert or not. So again, once they convert through that phase 1 and phase 2 process, they go into what's called phase 3, which is when the chapter actually charters. So once it's chartered, you've got commitment at this point in time. You've got people who have actually put their money on the table and their time on the table, and they're totally committed to it. We get them to clarify their business offering, the demographic they're actually marketing to. We go through a whole process around training people on how to use the BNI model. We make sure they're doing it consistently. We provide coaching on that consistency, and ultimately you end up with the profitability that comes from that process. So that's a simplified version of the steps we need to go through. It certainly looks fairly straightforward. There's a bit more to it than that though. So if we just have a look at how the investment runs during that process, the evaluation part, that obviously costs you nothing. You're out there doing your own due diligence on us, and we would encourage you, in fact expect you to do that before you actually make any commitment to be part of a build, because we've got a fairly sort of tight timeline that we run these to, and there's no point having people coming along who are half-hearted about it. So when you get into the seed phase, We're looking for the commitment fee, which is, I'll go through those costs shortly, but the commitment fee to be part of the build, there is a cost of building a chapter as distinct from running a chapter, and that's called the commitment fee. There are also venue fees. So these groups obviously have to meet in professional venues, and we have to pay those venues for the use of their facilities and any catering involved. So those are the sort of initial financial investments you're making, apart from the time you're putting in. Once we get into the build phase, phase 1 and phase 2, you've already paid the commitment fee. You only pay that once, but the venue fees continue all the time, every week. You'll pay an induction program cost, and I'll explain what that is shortly, and the annual membership. Now, these costs actually just go into a holding account. They don't defray. They actually sit there to actually reflect the commitment you are making to be part of this group. If for some reason we do not get the chapter built, if the chapter goes through this process in the build phase and then doesn't go any further and we don't get to charter, then we refund the induction program cost and the annual membership cost. The commitment fee isn't refundable, and the venue fees obviously aren't refundable because they're ongoing and they're just consumed as each time we meet. Once we get to charter, then the commitment fee has been expended, the induction program and the annual membership fees are basically kicked off. They now actually are paying for being in the program because we're now officially a chapter, and the only ongoing cost then is the venue fees and, of course, your annual membership as that falls due each year. So that's the simplified version. So let's go through it in a bit more detail. So there are 5 core steps which you might have picked up out of that little flowchart. There's the seed phase where we have 4 people typically. Once we've got about 4 people, we know we've got enough interest to be able to move forward. And the seed phase takes up to 3 months. So that might seem a long time, but it's the hardest part of the process because effectively you've got to find at least 4 people who have got some shared values, some shared interest, shared geographic interest, shared target market demographic interest, who want to actually go ahead and build a chapter. They've got the same degree of motivation and compulsion to do that, and it can take several months to actually come to fruition. I've seen it even take longer than that. But we'll work with a small group for up to 3 months to see if we can get it to roughly 10 people who are committed to start the process in a formal sense, and we'll give them some coaching along the way as we do that. The first phase, when we go to phase 1, is when we've got around that 10 people and we want to build to 15. It takes 6 weeks. We have 3 meetings typically in 6 weeks to build it from 10 to 15. And then once we've got 15 committed, qualified people, you might have more than that, but they might not all be as committed as they need to be. So we might have more than 15, but we've got to have at least 15 that we're happy with. Then we go into phase 2, and these go to weekly meetings. And in the weekly meetings, they go for 4 weeks, and the intention is to get it from 15 to 25 members. 25 is the minimum we like to launch at because we know at 25 or greater, it's a very highly sustainable unit that has enough momentum to keep going to get to where we want it to be, which is up in the 35, 45, 50 bracket. The next phase is once we've got to the 25 phase, the 4th phase is effectively training. We don't invite vigorously anymore. We will take the occasional visitor along, somebody who is already pretty qualified, somebody whose category is open. They already understand the BNI protocols. They don't need a lot of insight, if you like, into being able to join the chapter. They actually understand the model, and if there's an opportunity for them, then sometimes we'll take them in during phase 3. But generally, phase 3 is all about training. It's not about anything other than training. And what do we mean by training? It's basically member training and chapter training. How do you run your business unit? How do you run this unit of 25 business people so they work like a professional outfit so that they can effectively build a strong referral network? And then the final one is the launch phase. And so about 7 or 8 weeks after we've gone into charter, so the beginning of phase 3, we actually set some launch dates. And the idea of those launch dates, we have 2 large visitor days typically, where you'll have 70, 80, 90 people at an event, and you'll be looking to grow the chapter from 25 to 35 or more in that final phase within a couple of months of launch. That whole process can take as little as 4 or 5 months or as much as 6 or 7 months, depending on the energy that starts at the very beginning. Once you actually start the process and you go into phase 1, it goes pretty quick, as long as you've got everybody pulling their weight and maintaining their commitment. The whole journey, all the way through seed, phase 1 and phase 2, and launch, but not phase 3, is all about inviting people along to have a look at the model and see whether it's something that they can take advantage of, whether they've got the right attitude, the right fit, the right culture to be able to form referral relationships with the people in the room. So let's get down to the numbers, because it is basically a numbers game, and this is how it works. So I'm going to use a number of 8. So sometimes we will start with 8, but we prefer to start with 10. So if we have 8 participants in the seed phase and they invite 10 businesses to come and join them at each session, that'll be 80 invitations. That's 10 businesses each, so 80 invitations out to the marketplace. And we would typically expect about a 30% positive response to that. Around about 24 of those 80 people will say, yes, I'm interested. I'd like to have a further conversation. They'll be invited along to a meeting. Out of those 24 people that have been invited along, you'll only get half of them show up. So 12 will attend. That's pretty normal. Of the 12 that attend, roughly 25% will actually put an application form in and say, you know what, I want to actually have an even deeper conversation and see if this is going to be a fit. Of the 3 that will apply, typically roughly a third won't qualify because there will be an issue with the fit for the chapter. They'll find that the demands, if you like, of actually building a chapter are too great. They could be finding all sorts of reasons as to why they might not go ahead, but you'll get 2 that will qualify. So effectively, you're doing this every session. And as the numbers grow, obviously the chapter accelerates in terms of its size. So it does take persistence and consistency to get success, and I'll just show you a chart here of how the numbers look. So phase 1 you can see is 1, 2, and 3 on the left-hand side. If you start off with 8 participants, you've got 10 invitations each, that's 80 invitations. A 30% positive response, 24. These are the numbers I've just been through, but just showing how the table works. If 50% of them attend, you've got 12 show up. 25% apply, you've got 3 that apply. Acceptance of 2, roughly 60%. So as you get those 2 apply, you've actually then go from 8 to 10. Then you've got 98 invitations going out. Then you've got 29 positive responses and so on. And you'll see the numbers just keep flowing through in an 8-session program. So your phase 1 is a 6-week program every fortnight, so three sessions every 2 weeks. So it takes 6 weeks. By the time you've got to the end of phase 1, you should be at 15. And by the time you get to the end of phase 2, you should be somewhere around the 30, that sort of mark. And ideally what we're looking for is around 27 is a perfect minimum result, but 25 or greater, then we're okay at the end of phase 2. But it is possible to get as high as 35 or 40 if everybody is pulling their weight and doing everything they need to do. So it is purely a numbers game, and this is how the chart looks. So taking those numbers and just graphing them out, effectively once you start with that eight people, you can grow from 8 to 40 if you've got everybody who's heavily committed, really focused, really on their A game. The acceptances you get, it doesn't take very many, only 2 or 3 or 4 a week, and you can very quickly get up to that minimum target of having the right number of people in the room to form an awesome referral group. So in the seed phase, it takes up to 3 months. What are the expectations? We're going to have chapter development webinars every fortnight. In fact, they can be run as often as every week. And the idea of those chapter development webinars, such as this one, are basically to introduce this concept to those people who may not want to come to a meeting, but actually want to find out a little bit more about it. So they can come along to one of these webinars, do a bit of a, if you like, a drop the toe in the water and just see what it's all about. So we've also got BNI model type webinars as well that run for about 30 minutes, which explain how the BNI model works. So that's probably their first step anyway, if they don't know what BNI is about. We would have meet and greet sessions during the seed phase. So we would be planning perhaps weekly or fortnightly sessions where we can just get people together to have a chat about them, about the process, see what level of interest we've got, and see whether it's something that would work for them. There would be exclusive category allocation during the seed phase, but it's conditional upon participation. So if somebody comes in and they're the accountant in the group and they continue to invite and they show up every time we're having a meeting and they're obviously an active participant, then they would maintain their exclusive rights to that particular category. If they don't do that, then the category is open. We can only work with people who are actively participating and committed to the process, and the chapter director is responsible for making sure that that accountability is in place. We set up a closed Facebook group for the applicants so they can communicate with each other. So the ones that have actually put in an application, who have actually paid a commitment fee, go into a closed Facebook group so we can have that communication with the group whilst we're actually going through this seed phase. There are a lot of education and resources and connections that we offer the group. We actually have a website set up with podcasts and all sorts of tips and so on to be able to help you go through the inviting process. We run a webinar on how to invite to be able to help you with some of these, because a lot of people actually have not been through this process in their business before. So if it does nothing else, it teaches you how to actually reach out to your network, your community, even cold call, to be able to grow your network, which is a very, very useful skill to have when you're running a business. So what we're doing is during this period, just focused on inviting until we can actually get to that 10 or around that sort of 10 number, so we can actually go into the official build phase of the process. After 3 months, if we've been doing this and we're not at 10, we will just abandon the group. There is no point wasting people's time. All we're doing is just getting nowhere. Occasionally this happens where we get 4 or 5 people who want to try and build a group. They can't get to 10. They haven't got the commitment or the energy or the networks to be able to do it, or the influence. So there's no point spending our resources on doing that. So after 3 months, we'll reassess the group and see whether it's worth continuing. 3 months is pretty much the outside limit. It can happen as quick as 4 or 5 weeks. So it's certainly the outer limit from our point of view. What's the cost involved? In order to be in a seed phase, there's a chapter build or the commitment fee cost of $495. And what this covers is the coaching, tuition, and the management, administration of this process by the chapter director. The chapter director is going to be involved for something like anything up to 4 months, 5 months before the chapter gets chartered as they're building it. And that $495 applies to everybody coming into the build phase, because it effectively covers the cost of the director team. There's a chapter development director, there's a launch director, and there's typically a launch ambassador, and there's the admin staff in the background to actually manage this whole process. So it's quite intensive and quite time consuming. The venue costs are basically determined meeting by meeting. We might be trying different venues. They'll only be paid 1 week at a time. They are typically $40 to $50, depending upon the venue we actually choose to use. And during this phase of the build, the regional office generally manages the venue charges until such time as the chapter is chartered, when the chapter takes over that responsibility. A refundable portion of the investment is the induction program and the annual membership. So during the seed phase, we're not overly concerned about having this payment lodged. But certainly if it's lodged, it certainly does give us comfort that you are fully committed to it. But before we start phase 1, this must be lodged. We won't go into phase 1 with anybody who has not lodged the BNI membership portion of the program, because once we get started, we're expecting everybody is on board to actually go through to the end. So the BNI portion is the induction program, which I'll explain in more detail shortly. And it's actually explained in the BNI webinar we run. $847 for a 90-day induction program, which includes all your training. And there's the annual membership fee of $1,045, all of these including GST, of course. When it comes to working out how you get your initial group together, the best thing to do is to look at the particular business you're in and who is actually talking to your clients, who's talking in your marketplace at the same time that you are, but aren't competing with you. So if we take the accountants example, obviously bookkeepers, IT consultants, commercial lawyers, financial planners, commercial financiers, insolvency agents, commercial leasing people, all of these are sort of people that are potentially talking to the business owners that may be in that sort of financial headspace, where they're really potentially talking to your prospective clients at the same time that you are, either before or after the sale. So what you want to be attracting people who see relevance in having a relationship. If I'm an accountant, they see relevance in having you as a referral partner, and you can see relevance in having them as a referral partner. You're looking for that natural symbiotic relationship that comes from being in an industry where there are a range of services being provided, and you want to find those people that are having conversations with the same customers you are. So your target market and their target market are similar, but for different products or services, allowing you to pass referrals to one another as they arise. So you just go through this exercise. Everybody knows their business better than we do. So essentially you work out where you are likely to be able to get or give referrals to. We strongly recommend, in fact require, that all people involved in the seed phase start populating a list of at least 20 people that fit the categories that we've just described on that last list. So if you have five or six people you'd like to see in your chapter, then you need to be researching who is in either the geographic area or in that particular business space, that target demographic space in the same city, who might like to have some sort of a referral relationship with you, and start populating names. And all during the build, you need to be maintaining a list of 20 people that you're contacting or working. So essentially, once people say, no, I'm not interested, you can drop them off the list, you find somebody else to go on the list, and you're constantly inviting. The idea is to basically send out at least 10 invitations a week or a session for the chapter build. As you saw, that was a numbers game, as we went through before. And you'll find it easier to do that if you're constantly working a list of 20 people. We don't want to know who's on the list. We just want to know you're doing it, because if you're not doing it and others aren't doing it, then we're all wasting our time. So it's a really important factor that the director has to monitor to make sure that everybody understands what's expected of them in order for the group to be able to get to their BNI chapter build. Once we actually get to the 10 or more, we start phase one. Now in phase one, it's a 6-week program, essentially 3 to 4 sessions during that 6-week program. They're typically 2 weeks apart because you're fairly green at this when we actually start it. So we give you a week's break in between. And the week's break isn't so much for you to have a week off. It's actually to give you a bit more time to do some networking and to find those people that you'd actually like to invite along. Or it can be to go to other BNI chapters and understand how the business works, get to know the BNI community. A lot of them can actually help you as well. Go to networking events in between your meetings. So get into the networking scene so you can make those connections. The focus is totally on inviting. In those off weeks, you'll be going to those showcase chapters. These are the chapters that basically demonstrate best practice for BNI, and you're focused on inviting and networking. So that's phase one. It's 3 to 4 sessions over 6 weeks. And you have to get to 15. If we don't get to 15, we abandon the build because we have failed to meet phase one. So each one of these is a milestone. And if we don't make the milestone, we don't continue. Our experience has been that if you actually persist with a phase beyond these time limits, you basically end up with a very weak chapter, or you'll end up with a failed chapter anyway. The cost of being involved in phase one is the same as the seed phase. You're paying down the chapter build cost of $495, including GST, plus the venue costs. And of course, at this stage, you would have had to have paid the member application fees, which are $847 for the induction program, the 90-day induction program that is part of your membership. You only pay that once. And then the annual membership of $1,045. So if you look at the total cost of investment to go into phase one, you'll have spent $495 on the build. You'll have spent $1,892 on the year one investment. So there'll be a total of $2,387 to go through into phase one and be part of this chapter build. Bearing in mind, just to put this in perspective, the average revenue per member last year was $150,000. So it's not it might look like a significant amount of money, but it's actually in the context of what gets achieved at the end of the day. It's a fairly modest investment to make a multi-million-dollar business, which is what we're aiming to do. We go into phase two. And phase two, we go to weekly because we've now got ourselves into the rhythm. We've got some momentum going. We've got 15 people who are inviting roughly 15 people each week along. And we're looking for a session every week. Sometimes we'll go fortnightly depending upon our availability of director resources. But ideally, this would be a weekly event. Any alternate weekly activity would be basically going to networking events and ramping up what we're going to do in terms of bring people along, inviting people along. So it's all about inviting. We want to get to 27 at least. The reason we look for 27, bearing in mind that 25 is the sort of magic number, is that invariably somebody has some life experience, some life event once we go into phase 3, and we usually lose 1 or 2 people in phase 3 because all sorts of things from divorce to business sales to all sorts of stuff happens when you're actually dealing with people. So our experience is that if you start with 27 at phase 3, you'll end up with 25 by the end of phase 3. The costs of being involved in phase 2 are exactly the same as phase 1, no difference, all exactly the same types of investment. We get to phase 3. Once we've got to 25 or more members, the chapter is now chartered. We are now an official BNI chapter. We go through 6 sessions. We're meeting every week now, and everybody is expected to be there, obviously, all the way through this program. And we've got 6 training sessions. So we're training you how to behave as a chapter. You're going to training as a member. You're getting literally exposed to all of the education IP that we have available to you. It can be a little bit overwhelming, but this is the most intensive part of the program. So we're going through 6 weeks of training here, and we're going through that 90-day induction process at this point, because now your membership fee and your induction fee has now been activated and you're actually in the program. We do accept some visitors during this part of the program. So if somebody you come across actually has an opening for their category in the chapter, they know about BNI, they don't need any further real education around it, they know there's an opportunity and they actually want to come and join, then they can come along to those sessions at the end of the meeting. We'll have a bit of a discussion with them, make sure they're a cultural fit, do a bit of homework, bit of due diligence, check it with the members, and they can sometimes join the chapter during the training phase. So the membership fee is activated, and we're literally going down the path of releasing you on the public. So what are the costs involved? Well, the commitments fee's expired now. The induction program cost and the annual membership fee now kick off. The venue costs still apply, but now we've handed that over to the chapter. So the chapter bank account's been activated. The treasurer of the chapter is basically responsible for collecting that money and paying to the venue. There's a 90-day chapter review now operational once we've chartered. So what actually happens with the 90-day review, the chapter has the right to basically review any members in their first 3 months. And if for some reason there's been a breach of the code of ethics, or there has been inappropriate behavior, or there's been a lack of participation, a lack of engagement within the chapter, then the chapter can make the decision to release the member from any further obligation to be part of the chapter, and we give a pro rata refund of the annual membership fee. So if you're released from the chapter at 90 days, then effectively you would get 75% of your $1,045 refunded, but you can't pull out. So effectively this is a chapter decision, not a member decision. If a member decides to pull out after 1 or 2 months in the chapter, they have lost their money. This is about having committed people in the room who are committed to being successful. But if for some reason they've actually not doing that, they're not stepping into the satisfaction of the chapter, the membership committee can review them. Because at the end of the day, what we're wanting is a chapter that is harmonious, that is actually totally committed to investing in the people in the room. And so this 90-day one-time opportunity. It doesn't happen any other time during your membership. It's just the first 90 days to make sure we've got the right people in the room. And you've got to bear in mind also that when we go into phase 3, if we take people at the end of phase 2 in the last week, we actually don't really know them as well as we'd like. So some of the people coming along right at the end of the build may really not be fully evaluated, if you like. So it just gives us one last checkpoint to make sure that we're building a strong community as we go forward. And that's to protect everybody. We certainly don't want people in the room who are hanging around just because they paid a fee and they can't get any refund. So we want to make sure that everybody is committed to it. At the very worst, you're going to walk out with 3 months of training on how to referral market. So you won't miss out in terms of the investment you've made, because you're going to walk away with a lot of insight that you would not otherwise have had. When we get to the launch days, we have a couple of visitor days. We typically have 80 or more people in the room. The goal is to get to 35 or more members. And once we actually get to that sweet spot, we find that the revenue is basically exponential. Once you go past that 30 to 35 members, and you get this amazing result of revenue doubling start again. If you double the size of a chapter, the revenue goes up by between 6 and 10 fold. So getting up into that 30, 35 zone and going through to the 50 or 60 zone can make millions and millions of dollars worth of difference to the chapter revenue. A typical 20 to 25 member chapter will do about $1 million in the first year. If you get it to 40 or 50 members, you could be doing $5, $6, $7 million. And certainly some of our larger chapters now are doing consistently $1 million a month, $10, $12 million a year. And we've got chapters even doing more than that. So getting up to that 35 plus is a major, major goal from our point of view to make sure you are going to get a fantastic return on your investment. So that's the overview of how you build a chapter. If you've got any questions, pop them through to either Dan or myself. It's Dan at bnisc.com.au or Bob at bnisc.com.au. We'd love to have a talk to you if you've got any questions about it. This is a fairly serious decision that people make when they're actually going to go through this process. It is a long game decision, not a short game decision. It's something that will definitely pay off for those people who are referable, who have the right mindset. It's certainly, if you've got any charismatic nature about you, it's an absolute free kick in terms of being able to get you exposed and get you leveraged off other people's reputations. If you want to know more about how the BNI model works, I would recommend that you watch the BNI webinar, which we've prepared, called Word of Mouth Marketing, how you can get it. That's available every Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock. So if you want to watch that, just go to bnisc.com.au, go to the events tab, and you'll see those webinars. They run every Monday and, in fact, every Monday and Saturday, 4 o'clock on Mondays and 10 o'clock on Saturdays. So be looking forward to hearing from you. If you have any questions, pop them through, and we will see you at our next meeting. Bye for now.